Well, I was born in Greenville, South Carolina. Uh, one of 9 children. I had 7 brothers and 2 sisters. 6 brothers and 2 sisters. I was the 7th one, and I was born in the general hospital in Greenville, which is highly unusual because only me and one other sibling was born in the hospital. My oldest brother Tom was born in the general hospital in Greenville, and I was born in the hospital in Greenville. And I had an uncle that would always remind me. I was born on November the 14th, 1920, and he always would remind me that he went with my dad to the hospital and brought me and my mother home. And then when they got me home, they went to see Furman play Clemson down at the old field that's still there. I don't know what to call that field. But he said that Furman beat Clemson pretty good that Thanksgiving Day. And
good.
We lived out on Augusta Road in Greenville when I was a boy. And Augusta Road was dirt by the time you got out to where the city limits was. It was just a dirt road. And my dad bought us a billy goat and a wagon. We used to hitch that billy goat up to that wagon and ride up and down that road. And somewhere along the way, my dad, along with a woman named Maybelle Hatch, started a new church that was part of the First Baptist Church. Or maybe it was Pendleton Street, part of Pendleton Street, I'm not sure. But it was called Augusta Road Baptist Church. And my brother Tom was the first convert in that church. But it's a pretty good thriving church now. And of course, that's a main thoroughfare now, Augusta Road. And when I was a little over 4 years old, my dad decided that Spartanburg might be a better place to have a lumberyard than Greenville. And he had one lumberyard and part of one lumberyard. He was a partner in a second lumberyard there in Greenville. And so he sold out in Greenville and moved to Spartanburg. My dad thought Spartanburg would offer a better opportunity than Greenville. And so he moved to his family and his business to Spartanburg, and operated there until the Great Depression came. And of course, during that time, he lost everything. And we moved to a farm down where Mountain View Nursing Home is now. It's the land that we farmed. The thing I remember mostly about it during those days, I was 12 years old when we moved out of our home down on West Main Street, a big 2-story brick home. It had steam heat in it and hardwood floors. It was just a beautiful place. But I was 12 years old when we moved out and moved down to Cedar Springs and started farming. And we grew practically everything we ate for a while except sugar and flour. Well, flour, we took grain to the grain mill, and they'd swap us flour for the grain. And the same way with corn, we could take corn to a grits mill, and they'd swap it for cornmeal and grits. And so about the only thing we had to buy was coffee and sugar and a few of those kind of things. But we survived that, and along with a good many others. But I can remember those days and how tough where they were. And a train would come by and if there was an empty boxcar, it'd be just full of people trying to get to where they thought there would be work that they could do. There was all sorts of rumors, and under every bridge there was a hobo habitat, you know. And somebody would say, if you just get to Texas, there's plenty of work in Texas in the oil fields and all. And all these guys that try to get there to Texas to go to work to try to get a job. So a lot of it was just rumors, and bad rumors. But it was tough, and when Roosevelt was elected, he started putting those work programs in progress. The WPA and the CCC. He had a camp for boys that they were portable, and they moved them from county to county. Had portable barracks and portable mess hall, and he moved those teenage boys from county to county, and their job was to plant kudzu. And all of the places where there was erosion, they were given these kudzu sprouts. So they'd go out and all day long they planted kudzu.
So that's where it came from.
That's where it started. Yeah, you know what it did, it's just about taking some of the counties over. And we grew something not only enough for us to eat, but we had food that we gave away to friends and family and others, because times were really tough. There was no giveaways of any kind. There were no government subsidies of any kind. No Social Security, no aid for dependent children, no workman's comp, any of that kind of stuff, everything. All that came in after Roosevelt was elected in 1932. But by that time, things had begun to turn around and get a little bit better. My dad had bought the lumberyard back with money he borrowed from his mother. It went on the block for sale, and he bought the whole lumberyard, the 2 teams of horses he had, and about 3 trucks, and all of the inventory. They paid $500 for it because there was no one bidding against it. No one wanted a defunct lumberyard, I guess. So it was down on Henry Street, and right before World War II, we moved it down on Union Street because my dad wanted to put in some woodworking machinery, planters and things. And we were in the first fire zone downtown, and he was going to have to make a lot of arrangements for that to satisfy the fire department. And so he moved the operation out on Union Street. And of course we were there during World War II, and things got tough again because there was no building going on. And then things turned around, got a little better, and of course he opened the lumberyard back up. He never did really close it down, but there just wasn't anything going on. I mean, not even a pair of steps being built or anything, you know.
Can you tell me about your parents?
My parents, my mother was raised on a plantation down on the Savannah River, and of course she had never experienced white people doing manual work because everything was done with slave labor. Her dad was one generation beyond slavery. He actually fought in the Civil War as a lad. He took a horse and took a slave boy with him, and he was only in there for a few months before the war ended. But most of those slaves stayed when it was all over, and that house survived until about, I must have been maybe 14 or 15 when it caught on fire and burned. It was a big old house, plantation home, that my great-grandfather had built, and he had a land grant from the King of England for about 3,000 acres, and they planted cotton. Cotton was the main crop. And I know when they were integrating the schools, I was down at my mom's one time, and she said, she was talking about the integrating the schools, and she said those darkies don't want to go to school with the white people. She said, I know, said I taught them. I taught whites and blacks, and said they don't want to go to school with the white people. I said, Mom, I think you're wrong. At that time, they didn't even ride buses. There weren't any buses for blacks. And I said, of course they do. They want to get the same education that we're getting. She said, oh, I think you're wrong. And I said, well, Mom, you know, if my great-grandfather, your grandfather, my great-grandfather, had hoed his own cotton instead of having slaves doing it, we wouldn't have had this problem. I said, but he wanted to tell blacks what to do and sit on the front porch drinking mint juleps and let the blacks do the work. And I said, if he'd hoed his own cotton, we wouldn't have had that problem. She said, why, son, he couldn't hoe all that cotton. Said, well, those rows were so long that Pad'd start 50 black folks out in the morning chopping cotton. And they'd chop one row out, and the lunch wagon would meet them on the other end, feed them lunch, and they'd chop one row back. I said, boy, those were some long cotton rows. She said, she said we grew a lot of cotton, and I don't know, it was a different era, but anyway, things are a whole lot better now than they were then for everybody, and it's a good thing that everybody's afforded a good opportunity to get a good education if they want it.
What did he do?
My dad was born into a family in Tennessee, and at the age of 12, his dad was a railroad man, and he was killed on the railroad of some kind of a freak accident. And my dad quit school and went to work, and the jobs that he got was stringing telephone lines. Telephone was just coming into being, and they were following the railroads and stringing telephone lines. Of course, everything was horse and wagon, and according to my dad, he was part of a crew who was actually doing the manual work of putting up the poles, putting on a cross arm and stringing the wire. And they had a man that went ahead in a buggy and made arrangements for all these guys. Made arrangements for somebody to stable the horses and feed them, and to put the men up and feed them. And they just moved along the railroad, following the railroad, running telephone. And when he was not old enough to go in service while he was doing that job, but when he was old enough, I don't know, I think he had to be 19 maybe, he joined the Navy, and he was shipped off down to Cuba, to Guantanamo, and he was there when they were building that base, and he helped build that base. And when his 4 years was up in the Navy, he came out as an electrician, and so then he got a job as an electrician in Nashville, Tennessee, and he was the oldest of 3 boys and a sister. So his family had depended a whole lot on him to help them survive. And uh, while he was on that job, my mother had a brother who was in the lumber business, and he'd made a trip out to California to buy cedar shingles and line up some other lumber products, and came back through Nashville, stopped off to see his sister, my mother, and he offered my dad a job to move to Greenville and take over a retail lumber yard he had there, because there was a boom in Florida, and he was selling so much material in Florida that his wholesale business was taking up most of his time. And he told my dad that if he'd move to Greenville and take over that little lumber yard, that he could pay for it any way he wanted to. And so that's how my dad got into the lumber business. And after he had been there for a while, he and a fellow Howard opened up a second lumber yard, and then my dad decided to get out of it in Greenville and move to Spartanburg, because there were 7 good, strong lumber yards in Greenville, and there were only 3 in Spartanburg. And so he opened up a yard down on Henry Street in Spartanburg and sold out in Greenville. And that's the reason we were located in Greenville. Of course, most of my brothers and sisters were born in Spartanburg. Well, not most of them, at least half of them, I guess.
Okay.
But it's been a neat thing being a member of a big family, and I've got a pretty good sized family of my own.
I agree.
With 4 boys and 4 girls, and all of them are beautiful people, and all of them have done very well.
Well, and that all started, I guess, with you meeting Louise, right?
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
I met her sort of accidentally. I went to church one night, and I knew who she was because 2 of her brothers had come out during the summer months. They'd come out to our house, and there was a whole lot full of little pine saplings next door to the land where we lived out there. My dad had bought 2 lots, and one of them had all these little pine saplings on it. And so my brother Tom got the bright idea that we ought to cut down some of them and build us a log cabin. And so two of my wife's brothers came out almost every day that summer and helped us build that log cabin. So I knew them really before I knew her very well. I knew who she was because her mother was widowed early on, and she used to come and sit with her mother over on the Dean Street side in church, but I never had talked to her or been close to her until one night we all went to training union, and she was there because another girl wanted her to see a boy that she had a crush on. And when it was all over with and they came outside, I asked them if they won't stay for church, and they said no, they thought they'd leave and go on back home. I said, well, if you'll stay for church, I'll carry you home. I had a little 36 Ford convertible, and so they stayed, and I carried her home, and that began our friendship. And I was dating some other girls, and occasionally going down to Converse College and dating a girl down there from Birmingham, Alabama, some. And I found out they were all going to Ridgecrest for student night for student week up there. And so me and my brother Barry decided we'd go up on the weekend too, and so we went up. And she was dating another boy at the time, and I was dating this girl from Alabama. And somehow or another, we just got connected there and started talking to each other. And it was pretty evident right away that both of our dates were not too happy with us being together. So I finally just said, well, I'll see you when we get back to Spartanburg. And when we got back to Spartanburg, I called her, and we started dating. She was at Winthrop at the time, a sophomore, and we dated some that summer. And by her junior year, we were pretty much in love, and I was going over to Winthrop every time I could. But it was during the war, and the gasoline was rationed, and I couldn't always get gas for my little old Ford. But I found a way. I don't know whether I should tell it on a tape. I might get locked up for it. But we could get gas for the trucks, but we couldn't get anything for my car. So I found a way to siphon it out of the trucks, put it in my car, and carry some spare along with me in case I needed it. But I was afraid you had to turn your mileage in.
Mm-hmm.
But I found a way where I could reach up underneath there and I could disconnect the speedometer, and it would quit registering the mileage, you know.
Sure.
So I did all kind of trickery, but I was determined to get over to see my